Some nights settle over the desert so gently you almost trust them. The air cools, the wind softens, and the land seems to exhale like it's decided just for a few hours to let the world rest. Ranger Cole Brennan trusted nights like that more than he trusted people. He walked the perimeter road alone, boots crunching lightly in pale sand, his flashlight sweeping a slow, familiar arc across scrub brush, scattered rock, and the twisted silhouettes of dead mesquite. The Red Mesa Wildlife Preserve lay open around him, an endless bowl of darkness under a sky crowded with stars. Cole had walked this route hundreds of times. He knew where the ground dipped, where the rocks liked to shift, where coyotes sometimes watched without making a sound. Tonight felt no different. At least that's what he told himself. He checked his watch, just past midnight. Another quiet shift. Another night where nothing asked anything of him. Cole preferred it that way. Silence was predictable. Silence didn't reach out and grab you when you weren't looking. He slowed near a dry wash, scanning for tracks out of habit more than concern. The radio on his shoulder crackled once, then went still again. No calls, no alerts. Just the low whisper of wind sliding along the desert floor. Cole took a breath and let it out through his nose. That was when he felt it. Not a sound, not movement, just the unmistakable sensation of not being alone. He stopped walking. The desert seemed to pause with him. Even the wind pulled back like it was waiting to see what he'd do next. Cole stood perfectly still for a slow count of 5, listening, letting his eyes adjust beyond the reach of his flashlight. Probably a coyote, he muttered. He took one step forward. A faint crunch answered behind him. Cole turned sharply, swinging the beam in a wide arc. The light skimmed over rock's brush and a dead branch, then caught on something small at the edge of the glow, a dark shape. For a heartbeat, his mind refused to place it. It didn't fit any animal he expected to see out here, not at this hour. Too low to the ground, too still. Its fur didn't reflect the light it drank it in like the darkness itself had taken form. Then it moved. 2 small eyes caught the beam shining softly. Not with fear, not with aggression, with a steady, searching focus that tightened Cole's chest for reasons he couldn't explain. "A cub," he whispered. The animal took a hesitant step forward. Long legs awkward and thin, a small head, ears tipped forward listening. And the fur black, not shadowed, not dust-darkened. Truly black, the kind of color that didn't belong out here in the desert night. Cole's grip tightened on the flashlight. A lion cub no more than a few months old, too small to be alone, too quiet to be safe. "What the hell?" he breathed. Every instinct drilled into him over decades in the field flared at once. Lion cubs didn't wander alone. Where there was a cub, there was a mother. And where there was a mother, there was danger. Cole swept the light wider, searching the dark for movement, for the low gleam of adult eyes, for the warning silhouette of muscle in the brush. Nothing. The cub didn't run. It didn't snarl. It simply stood there watching him, chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. "Easy," Cole said quietly, more to himself than the animal. "You shouldn't be here." He took a slow step backward. The cub followed. Not rushing, not hesitating, just matching him. Cole frowned and stepped back again, boots sinking slightly into softer sand. The cub mirrored the movement, closing the distance until it was within 10 feet. "That's far enough," Cole said, voice firmer. The cub stopped, tilted its head. Its tail flicked once, then stilled. For a long moment, man and animal studied each other in silence. Something shifted inside Cole, an old, unwelcome pressure he hadn't felt in years. He didn't like it. He preferred situations he could name, risks he could measure. This felt like something else, something uninvited. He turned and started walking again, longer strides this time, angling toward the distant lights of the ranger station. He counted his steps like it meant something. 1, 2, 3. The soft crunch of sand followed. Cole didn't turn around right away. He already knew. When he finally did, the cub was there, padding after him, head low, ears alert. Not playful, not lost. Determined. "All right," Cole said, stopping again. "That's enough. He crouched, making himself smaller, keeping his movements calm. He'd handled frightened animals, injured ones, aggressive ones. This was none of those. "You need to go back," he told it gently. "Your mother's looking for you." The cub blinked, stepped closer, and then very carefully reached out and touched the heel of his boot with one small paw. The contact was light, almost hesitant. Cole froze. His breath caught in his throat before he could stop it. That simple, wordless gesture, so deliberate, so strangely human in its intention, hit him harder than any growl or charge ever could. "Don't," he whispered. The cub withdrew its paw. Then it made a sound, not a roar, not a cry, just a thin, breathy noise that trembled on the edge of breaking. Cole straightened slowly, jaw clenched. He'd heard that sound before, years ago, somewhere else, from another small voice. He turned away sharply and started walking again, faster now, like distance alone could quiet what was clawing its way up through his chest. Behind him the soft footsteps followed, and as the desert swallowed the sound of his boots and replaced it with the steady rhythm of two sets of steps, instead of one, Cole Brennan had the sudden unsettling certainty that this quiet, unremarkable night had already chosen a different ending. The cub's footsteps followed Cole Brennan for nearly a quarter-mile before he finally stopped pretending it wasn't happening. The ranger station lights glimmered faintly on the horizon, small, steady, reassuring. Safety, procedure, paperwork. The place where everything had a form, a rule, and an explanation. Cole slowed, then came to a full stop. Behind him the cub stopped too. He didn't turn right away. He stared out across the desert, jaw tight, as if looking hard enough might make the problem solve itself. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of dust and iron. Somewhere far off a night bird called once, then fell silent. "This isn't how this works," Cole said aloud. He turned. The cub sat on its haunches, perfectly still. Its dark shape nearly blended into the night except for the quiet intelligence in its eyes. It wasn't pacing, it wasn't panting, it wasn't afraid, it was waiting. Cole straightened slowly, every instinct urging him to disengage. He'd learned that lesson a long time ago, how to step back, how to draw a line, how to keep just enough distance to do the job without letting it cost more than it should. "Go on," he said, pointing back toward the open desert. "That way." The cub glanced in the direction he pointed. Then it looked back at him. It didn't move. Cole exhaled sharply through his nose. "I'm not your answer," he said, though he wasn't sure why he felt the need to explain himself to a wild animal. "I'm just passing through." He took a step sideways, angling away, testing. The cub rose and adjusted with him, maintaining the same distance like an invisible line tethered them together. That did it. Cole turned and walked again, faster now, boots striking the ground with purpose. He didn't look back. He told himself this was the difference between now and then, that walking away this time was the right choice. The sound followed him anyway. Not rushing, not fading, just there. Cole swore under his breath and stopped again, dragging a hand down his face. He was tired. That was all. Long shift, not enough sleep. The mind played tricks when it wanted to fill silence with meaning. He glanced down. The cub stood closer now, close enough that he could see the fine dust clinging to its whiskers, the slight tremor in its legs when it shifted its weight. Up close it looked even younger than he'd thought. Too young to survive long on its own. That's when irritation flared, not at the cub, but at himself. "Don't do this," he muttered. Cole had built his life around not doing this, around staying exactly where he was needed and no farther, around following protocol, because protocol didn't ask questions afterward. Protocol didn't wake you in the middle of the night with memories you couldn't shut off. He reached for his radio, thumb hovering over the call button. He could report it, call in wildlife response, let someone else handle it. That was the clean solution. The cub shifted, stepping just close enough that its shoulder brushed his shin. The contact was brief, but it sent a sharp jolt straight through him. Cole froze. A memory surfaced before he could stop it. A narrow hallway. Too quiet. A child standing barefoot on cool tile, gripping the edge of his jacket with both hands. Eyes wide. Waiting. "Don't go yet," a voice had said. "Please." Cole swallowed hard and stepped back, breaking the contact. "Stop," he said, his voice rougher now. "You don't get to do that." The cub blinked slowly, then lowered itself to the ground, belly pressed to the sand. Not submissive, just exhausted. Cole looked away, heart pounding harder than the situation warranted. He hadn't spoken that memory aloud in years, hadn't let it rise fully into focus. He'd told himself it belonged to another life, another man. The desert didn't care. He forced himself to take inventory the way training had taught him. No immediate threat, no sign of the mother, no gunshots, no vehicle tracks, no active disturbance he could see. And then he noticed something else. A dark smear on the sand a few yards away, barely visible under the starlight. Cole stiffened. He moved toward it instinctively, crouching low. The mark was thin, stretched as if something had been dragged. Not fresh, not old either. Blood. His gaze followed the faint trail until it vanished beneath shifting sand. But the direction was clear. East! Cole straightened slowly. The cub rose at once and padded to his side, tail flicking once. It wasn't following him now. It was waiting for him to choose. Cole closed his eyes briefly, pressing his tongue to the roof of his mouth, like it might steady the ache building behind his ribs. He thought of the station lights ahead, of paperwork, of explanations that ended cleanly. Then he thought of the blood, and of the small black shape beside him standing there like it had been part of the night all along. "Damn it," Cole whispered. He turned east, away from the road, away from the lights, and stepped into the open desert. Gravel shifted under his boots. The air felt heavier out here, cooler, charged with something he didn't want to name. Behind him, the cub fell into step without hesitation. Cole didn't tell it to stop. He didn't tell himself this was just another task. He simply walked on, following a trail that refused to let him walk away. The desert opened up as Cole Brennan moved east, leaving the hard-packed road behind for softer ground that shifted under each step. This part of the preserve felt different, less traveled, less forgiving. Low scrub brushed against his boots, and the smell of dust thickened, threaded now with something sharper, metallic, faint but unmistakable. He didn't look back to check if the cub was still there. He didn't need to. He could feel it now, the soft, steady padding just behind his right heel. Not close enough to trip him, not far enough to doubt. It followed like it already knew his stride. Cole angled his flashlight low, scanning the sand. The smear of blood appeared again, then vanished, then returned in broken streaks, thin lines interrupted by patches of disturbed ground. Whatever had made them hadn't been moving well, dragged maybe, or limping. "This is a bad idea," Cole muttered, though the words carried little conviction. The radio at his shoulder felt heavier with every step, like a reminder pressing against his collarbone. He could still call this in. He knew the phrasing by heart: unknown animal injury, possible illegal activity requesting support. But each time his thumb hovered near the button, his eyes drifted to the cub. It wasn't frantic, it wasn't confused. Its head stayed, low ears forward, occasionally lifting its nose to test the air before continuing. When the trail thinned, the cub slowed, circled once, then corrected course with quiet certainty. Cole watched it work and felt something settle uncomfortably in his chest. "You've done this before," he said softly. The cub flicked an ear but didn't look at him. They moved into a shallow basin where the wind behaved differently, curling along the ground instead of sweeping cleanly across it. Cole adjusted his grip on the flashlight and took a careful breath. The air tasted wrong here, stale, trapped. Something caught the beam ahead. Metal. Cole crouched, brushing sand aside with a gloved hand. A length of rusted chain emerged half-buried, pulled tight toward a cluster of rocks. His jaw clenched. A trap. Not new, not legal. The kind left behind long after the men who set it had moved on, indifferent to what it caught, or how long it suffered. Cole straightened slowly, pulse ticking louder in his ears. "This didn't just happen," he said under his breath. The cub stepped closer, stopping at his side. It looked from the chain to Cole, then toward the darker stretch of basin beyond the rocks. Its tail swayed once, then stilled. It wanted him to keep going. Cole hesitated. If this led where he thought it did, there would be no clean exit, no simple fix. You don't go into a situation like this without consequences. "You don't know what you're asking," he told the cub. The cub sat down. Then deliberately it lifted one paw and placed it on the toe of Cole's boot. Not a plea, not panic. Trust. The word landed harder than he expected. Cole looked down at the paw, then at the small face turned up toward him. In the faint light, the cub's eyes held something more than instinct. Intent. Cole felt the tension in his shoulders ease just a fraction. "All right," he said quietly, "but you stay behind me." The cub rose and stepped back half a pace, as if agreeing to the terms. They moved on. The basin narrowed into a dry ravine, its edges carved sharp by years of flash floods. Cole slowed, listening. The night here was wrong too quiet. Even the insects had gone still. Then he heard it. Not a roar, not a cry. A low, uneven breath. Cole's heart hit hard once. He cut the flashlight and waited, letting his eyes adjust. The sound came again, ragged, strained. Beside him, the cub stiffened. Cole descended carefully, boots scraping softly against stone. Halfway down, the smell hit him full force, blood old and new heavy in the air. At the bottom, the ravine widened just enough for him to turn the light back on. The beam found a shape in the sand. Large. Still. Cole stopped breathing. A lioness lay on her side, ribs rising shallowly. Her fur was matted dark with blood. One leg twisted at an unnatural angle, bound tight by a steel snare anchored deep into the rock. Alive. Barely. Cole dropped to one knee without thinking. His chest felt hollow, like something essential had been scooped out of him. Behind him, the cub rushed forward, pressing against the lioness's neck. It nuzzled, whining softly. The lioness's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, then fixed on her cub. A faint rumble left her throat. Not a warning. Recognition. "Oh," Cole whispered. Everything shifted in that single word. The cub hadn't been following him. It had been leading him. Cole reached for his knife, surprised at how steady his hands felt. He hadn't planned to pass this moment, hadn't decided what came next. But as he watched the cub curl protectively against its injured mother, guarding her with a body that barely weighed more than his pack, Cole understood one thing with painful clarity. This wasn't a choice anymore. It was a responsibility. And as the lioness's exhausted gaze settled on him, not fearful, not hostile, just alert, Cole felt the full weight of what the cub had trusted him to find. Cole Brennan stayed kneeling in the ravine long after his flashlight stopped shaking. The lioness's breathing was uneven, each rise of her chest followed by a pause that stretched just a second too long. The steel cable bit deep into her leg, swollen flesh pressed hard against cold metal. She didn't thrash, didn't bare her teeth. She watched him. Her eyes were dulled by pain but sharp with awareness, as if she were measuring what kind of man he was going to be. Cole had spent years believing he understood silence. This was different. This silence had weight. The cub shifted beside its mother, restless. It nudged her muzzle, then pressed its small forehead into the curve of her neck. And then it made the sound again. Not loud, not desperate. Just a thin, breathy call that trembled like it might disappear if it wasn't heard. Cole flinched. The ravine seemed to close in around them, stone walls drawing nearer, as the sound echoed once and vanished. His grip tightened on the flashlight, knuckles whitening. He knew that sound. It wasn't the voice of fear. It was the voice of someone who had already waited too long. The memory rose without asking permission. A hospital hallway washed in fluorescent light. A plastic chair pressing cold against the backs of his legs. The smell of disinfectant. Sharp, sterile, unforgettable. His phone vibrating in his pocket while he stared at the floor, telling himself everything would still be there when he went back. "Dad?" The voice had been soft, tired, trying to be brave. Cole squeezed his eyes shut, breath hitching as years collapsed into the space of a single heartbeat. He'd told himself the story so many times it had become smooth at the edges. An accident, bad timing, no one's fault. But standing in a ravine with a wounded lioness bleeding into the sand, her cub calling out with the last of its strength, the story cracked. He hadn't just been unlucky. He had chosen wrong. Cole opened his eyes and forced himself back into the present. The cub had gone quiet now, watching him with a focus that felt uncomfortably direct. The lioness's gaze never left his face. "I hear you," Cole said hoarsely. The words surprised him as much as they seemed to settle the air around them. He shifted closer, careful, deliberate. The lioness tensed muscles quivering beneath her matted fur, but she didn't strike, didn't pull away. She only watched, breath-catching, conserving what little strength remained. Cole set the flashlight down and reached for his knife. The blade caught starlight as he leaned in, studying the snare with practiced eyes. Old wire, thick, unforgiving, anchored deep into stone. Cutting it would take time. Cutting it wrong could make things worse. "All right," he murmured. "We'll do this slow." The cub scooted closer, pressing its shoulder against Cole's knee. The contact was small, steady, grounding. Cole didn't pull away. He slid the knife beneath the wire and began sawing carefully, metal rasping softly in the quiet. The lioness flinched, a low sound rumbling deep in her chest. Cole stopped instantly. "I know," he whispered. "I know it hurts." He waited until her breathing evened again before continuing. The cub answered with a soft sound of its own, pushing its head against its mother's jaw, staying close. The wire shifted just a little. Cole's hands trembled now, not from fear, but from the effort of holding himself together. Each scrape of metal against metal echoed in his skull. He worked slowly, deliberately, refusing to rush. Time stretched. The cub's small body leaned against his leg, warm and solid. That simple weight unraveled him more than the blood, more than the lioness's pain. A tear slid down his cheek before he noticed it. Then another. Cole bowed his head, breath-breaking, as the truth he'd buried for years finally surfaced. He wasn't crying only for the lioness. He was crying for the man he had been. For the moment he had turned away because it was easier to believe there would be time later. "There isn't always later," he whispered. The wire snapped. The sound was sharp, sudden cracking against the ravine walls. Cole jerked back instinctively, heart slamming in his chest. The lioness cried out, a raw, broken sound that tore straight through him, then collapsed again, her leg free but useless beneath her. Cole dropped the severed cable and moved at once, pulling supplies from his pack. Adrenaline burned away the haze of grief. He cleaned the wound as best he could, wrapped it tight, pressed down to slow the bleeding. The lioness's breathing steadied gradually, though her eyes never left him. Measuring. The cub climbed halfway onto her chest, curling protectively against her. Its ribs moved fast as it panted, then slowed. Cole sat back on his heels, chest heaving, face wet, vision blurred. The world felt sharper than it had in years. "I didn't come here to save you," he said quietly, voice breaking. "You brought me." The cub lifted its head, eyes bright even in the dim light. And in that moment Cole understood the truth that had followed him through the desert all night. The cub hadn't chosen him because he was strong. It had chosen him because it needed someone who wouldn't leave. Cole wiped his face with the back of his hand and reached for his radio. "Dispatch," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "I've got a severely injured adult lion. Illegal snare. I need assistance." Static crackled back, calm and distant. "Copy that, Ranger Brennan. Stand by." Cole lowered the radio and looked at the two lives pressed together in the sand. The cub watched him, not with fear now, but expectation. Cole nodded once, sealing something inside himself. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The radio fell quiet again, the calm voice from dispatch already fading into the background. The ravine felt heavier now, as if the night itself had leaned closer to listen. Cole knew help wouldn't come quickly, not out here, not at this hour. Whatever happened next would be on him. He shifted his weight carefully, keeping his movements slow. The bandage around the lioness's leg was already darkening, but the bleeding had slowed. She was conscious, eyes tracking every move he made, her body rigid with pain and resolve. Cole had treated injured animals before. He'd worked rescues that ended cleanly and others that didn't. But never like this, never this close. Never with a full-grown lioness balanced so tightly between survival and collapse. The cub climbed down from her chest and padded toward him, stopping just short of his knee. It looked up at his face, then back toward the mouth of the ravine. Its ears pricked forward. Its meaning was unmistakable. This wasn't over. Cole followed the cub's gaze, and his stomach tightened. Beyond the ravine, the desert lay quiet and open, but the quiet had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind of silence that followed something already gone wrong. He rose slowly, scanning the ground beyond the lioness. Now that he knew how to read the night, the signs jumped out at him. Deep boot prints pressed into the sand, heavier than a hiker's. Too deliberate. Nearby, faint drag marks led off into the darkness, ending abruptly where the wind had begun its work. Cole swore under his breath. This hadn't been an accident. Someone had set the trap. Someone had checked it. Someone had left her here. And if they'd been here recently, there was every chance they'd come back. The cub made a low sound, almost a warning, and stepped back toward its mother. The lioness tried to rise, her muscles bunching with effort, but her injured leg collapsed beneath her. She let out a short, sharp breath and went still, sides heaving. "Easy," Cole said, dropping back beside her. "Don't try." He pressed his palm gently against her shoulder, not to restrain her, just to let her feel where he was. After a moment, the tension beneath his hand eased slightly. Cole's thoughts raced. Leaving them here wasn't an option. Not with the trap, not with the tracks, not with the time it would take for help to reach them. But moving a full-grown lioness with a shattered leg through the desert at night was reckless at best. Reckless had never been his style. The cub made the decision for him. It turned and trotted a few steps toward the ravine's edge, then stopped and looked back. When Cole didn't move, it returned and nudged his thigh firmly this time. "No," Cole said automatically. "I can't just—" The cub cut him off with a sharp, breathy sound louder than before. It planted its feet, body tense, eyes bright with urgency. Cole stared at it, heart hammering. "You're telling me we don't stay," he said quietly. The cub didn't move. Cole closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them again, the decision had settled with a strange, steady calm. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch," he said. "Change of plan. I'm relocating the animal. Immediate risk of human interference." There was a pause, longer this time. "Negative, Brennan," came the reply. "You're not authorized." "I know," Cole said, cutting in. His voice was steady. "But I'm doing it anyway." Silence. Then quieter. "Copy. Keep us updated." Cole lowered the radio and exhaled. "All right," he said, meeting the lioness's gaze. "We're moving." It took time, more than he liked. He fashioned a crude sled from a tarp and broken branches, working carefully, keeping his movements slow and predictable. The cub stayed close sometimes, stepping in front of him, as if inspecting his work, then returning to its mother's side. When everything was ready, Cole braced himself and began pulling. The lioness let out a low sound of protest, but she endured it. Teeth clenched, eyes locked on him. Cole's muscles burned as he hauled her inch by inch up the ravine wall. Sweat soaked into his collar despite the cool air. He stopped often, checked her breathing, adjusted the bandage, murmured reassurances he hadn't known he still carried inside him. At the top, the desert stretched wide and exposed. Cole paused, listening. Far off, an engine rumbled, faint, distant, but unmistakable. The cub froze, its ears flattened. Cole's blood ran cold. "Not good," he whispered. He scanned the horizon, then made his choice. He angled away from the sound, pulling the sled toward a cluster of low rock formations that offered some cover. The engine faded, then returned closer this time. They were searching. Cole pushed harder, every nerve screaming at him to move faster. The cub ran ahead, stopping every few yards to look back, guiding him along a twisting path between stone and shadow. Finally, they reached a narrow cut in the land, a shallow gorge shielded from the open desert. Cole collapsed to his knees, breath-ragged arms shaking. He checked the lioness again. She was alive, barely, but holding on. The cub pressed against her side, then turned its head toward Cole and made a soft sound, something close to relief. Cole rested his forehead against the cool stone. "This is what you were showing me," he murmured. "All of it." The cub hadn't just led him to its mother. It had been leading him away from what was coming back. Cole lifted his head, resolve hardening in his chest. Dawn was still hours away. He wasn't leaving, and as he settled beside the wounded lioness, keeping watch while the cub stood guard at the edge of the shadows, Cole knew the hardest part of the night was still ahead. The narrow gorge held the night like a secret. Stone walls rose just high enough to break the wind, trapping the cooler air and muting the sounds of the open desert beyond. Cole Brennan sat with his back against the rock legs, drawn up, arms resting loosely on his knees. His muscles ached in waves now that the urgency had slowed every pull from the climb, replaying itself beneath his skin. The lioness lay a few feet away on the makeshift bedding. Her breathing was shallow but steady, each rise of her chest deliberate, controlled. The cub paced once, twice, then finally settled beside her, pressing its small body into the curve of her chest. For the first time since the night began, nothing moved. No engines, no voices, no radio chatter, just breath. 3 different rhythms, fragile and temporary, balanced between what had already gone wrong and what still might. Cole wiped his face with his sleeve, surprised by how damp it was. Sweat, he told himself, just exhaustion. His hands trembled faintly as the adrenaline drained away, leaving behind the full weight of what he'd done. He leaned forward and checked the bandage again. The bleeding had slowed further, but the leg was badly damaged. Infection would be a risk even if help arrived soon. He knew that. He knew all the ways this could still end badly. "Hang in there," he murmured, not sure which of them he was speaking to. The cub lifted its head and looked at him. It didn't blink, didn't shift away. Its eyes looked too old for its small body, too aware. Cole met that gaze and felt something inside him loosen. "I didn't understand at first," he said quietly. "I thought you were lost." The cub's ears flicked once. "I thought you needed me." The words hung in the still air, heavy and honest. Cole swallowed. His throat tightened as the realization settled fully into place. "That's not what this was, is it?" The cub rose and padded toward him, stopping close enough that Cole could feel the warmth radiating from its small frame. It sat and tilted its head, listening. "You followed me," Cole continued softly, "because you needed someone who would follow you back." The truth landed not like a thought, but like weight pressing down on his chest until his breath caught. The cub hadn't chosen him because he was a ranger, or because he carried tools and authority. It had chosen him because it had tried everything else. Cole turned his head away, embarrassed by the sudden burn behind his eyes. But the tears came anyway, slow, quiet, unstoppable. They slid down his cheeks and disappeared into the sand. "I know what that's like," he whispered. The cub stepped closer and placed one small paw on Cole's knee. Steady, certain, that was all it took. Cole bowed his head, shoulders shaking as a sound he'd held back for years finally escaped him. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet, fractured release of a man who had spent too long believing grief could be managed if it was never allowed to breathe. "I left," he said, voice breaking. "I thought I had time. I thought coming back later would be enough." The cub stayed where it was, paw resting against his leg, an anchor in the present. "I didn't hear him," Cole continued. "Or maybe I did, and I just didn't listen." Behind him, the lioness shifted faintly, letting out a low, tired sound. The cub glanced back at her, then returned its attention to Cole as if holding both worlds at once. "You listened," Cole said to the cub. "You didn't stop asking." The cub's tail flicked once. Cole drew a long, shaky breath. The crying eased, leaving behind an ache that felt different now, cleaner, honest. He leaned back against the rock and looked up at the narrow strip of sky visible above the gorge. The stars were thinning, dawn was coming. "I didn't come out here tonight to make up for anything," he said softly. "But maybe this is how it starts." The cub returned to its mother, curling against her side. The lioness opened her eyes briefly, golden, exhausted, and looked at Cole, not with fear, not with gratitude, with understanding. Cole nodded once, accepting an agreement that didn't need words. He checked his pack, then the radio. Still no new transmissions. Still time. He rose quietly, scanning the edges of the gorge. Staying hidden wasn't enough. Waiting wasn't enough. If the people who'd set the trap came back, and Cole was certain they would, this place would turn dangerous fast. He tightened the straps on his pack and picked up his flashlight. "We're not done yet," he said. The cub lifted its head, at once alert again. Cole looked between the cub and the wounded lioness and felt the resolve settle fully into his bones. He'd spent years believing redemption was something you earned alone, quietly by enduring. Now he understood something different. Sometimes redemption followed you through the dark and refused to let you walk away. Dawn crept in slowly, pale and uncertain, as if the desert itself wasn't sure it was ready to reveal what the night had hidden. Cole Brennan stood at the edge of the narrow gorge, watching the light spill across stone and sand. In the early hours, the land looked different, less forgiving, more honest. Shadows thinned, shapes sharpened. Nothing could pretend to be something else. Behind him, the lioness shifted weakly. The cub was on its feet at once, pressing close to her side before glancing toward Cole, alert and focused. The bond between them was unmistakable now, not desperate, not frantic, purposeful. Cole checked his watch. Still too early for backup. Still too dangerous to move the lioness any farther without help. The choice pressed on him from both sides. Leaving would be easier. He could mark the location, retreat to the station, wait for a team with the right equipment. That was the clean professional option, the one written into manuals and incident reports. But Cole already knew what would happen if he left. The tracks told him that much. Just beyond the gorge, fresh tire marks cut across the sand, sharp-edged, careless, too new to ignore. Someone had been here not long ago. Cole crouched and studied the ground more closely. A crushed cigarette filter, a scrap of torn plastic half buried in sand. The kind of signs left by men who didn't expect to be challenged and didn't worry about what they left behind. His jaw tightened. The cub padded closer and let out a soft, insistent sound. Not fear. Expectation. Cole straightened and looked out across the desert, already picturing it. The vehicle returning, the men scanning the land, following the trail he'd tried to erase. They wouldn't hesitate. Not for him, not for the animals. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch," he said. "I'm staying on site." There was a pause. Static whispered in his ear. "Brennan, that's not advised," came the reply. "Your safety," I know, Cole said evenly, "but I'm not leaving them." Silence again. Then quieter. "Understood. We're mobilizing as fast as we can." Cole lowered the radio. He knelt beside the lioness and adjusted the bandage, easing the pressure where he could. She flinched, then relaxed her breathing, shallow but steady. Her eyes followed his movements, never losing focus. "I'm not going anywhere," he told her. The cub watched closely, tail flicking once before it settled near her shoulder. Cole gathered what little cover the gorge offered, shifting rocks and brush to break sight lines from the open desert. It wasn't much, but it was something. He worked quietly, efficiently, every motion deliberate. Time stretched. The sun climbed higher. Heat began to seep into the stone. Sweat trickled down Cole's spine as he scanned the horizon again and again, muscles tight, senses tuned to every distant sound. Then he heard it. An engine. Low, steady, too close. Cole dropped into a crouch, heart hammering. The cub stiffened, ears flattening. The lioness tried to rise, failed, and let out a low, frustrated sound. "Easy," Cole whispered. "I've got this." The engine slowed. Tires crunched on gravel beyond the ridge. Voices drifted faintly on the wind, casual, unhurried. They were back. Cole's mind moved fast. Angle of the sun, distance, line of sight. He didn't reach for his weapon. He reached for his presence. Rising slowly, deliberately, Cole stepped out into the open. The voices cut off. Two men stood beside a dusty pickup, surprise flashing across their faces when they saw him. One squinted against the sun, the other swore under his breath. "Morning," Cole called calmly. "This area is closed." One of the men let out a short, humorless laugh. "Didn't see any signs." "You weren't looking," Cole replied. He stood his ground, shoulders squared, hands visible. Just a ranger in uniform, unmoving, unmistakable. "You need to leave," Cole said. "Now." The men exchanged a glance. One took a step forward, eyes narrowing. "You alone out here, Ranger?" Cole didn't answer. Behind him, unseen, the cub let out a sharp sound. The man's gaze flicked past Cole, catching movement in the gorge. His expression changed interest, sparking calculation setting in. Cole stepped sideways, blocking the view. "This conversation is over." For a moment, no one moved. Then a new sound rolled across the desert. Sirens, distant but unmistakable. Cole didn't smile. He didn't need to. The men cursed, scrambling back into their truck. The engine roared to life, tires spinning as they tore away across the sand, leaving a cloud of dust behind them. Cole stood there until the sound faded completely. Only then did his knees threaten to give out. He turned and walked back into the gorge, breath shaky, adrenaline draining fast. The cub ran to meet him, circling once before pressing close. The lioness watched him steadily, tail twitching faintly. "It's done," Cole said softly. "They're gone." The sirens grew louder now, real close. Cole knelt beside the lioness and rested his hand against her shoulder, anchoring himself to the moment. He had stayed. He had not stepped away when it mattered. As rescue vehicles crested the ridge and sunlight poured fully into the gorge, Cole felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not relief, not pride. Belonging. Weeks passed, though. For Cole Brennan, the night never felt far away. The rehabilitation site sat at the edge of open land, low fencing, tracing a gentle curve against the desert. The air there was clean and cool in the early morning, carrying the faint scent of sage and sun-warmed stone. Cole stood with his hands resting loosely at his sides, watching. The lioness moved first. Her steps were careful but steady now, no longer driven by pain, only mindful of it. A thin scar traced down her leg, pale against tawny fur, a reminder written into her body. Strength had returned to her frame, not loud or showy, but undeniable. The cub circled her once, then twice. Its black coat caught the light like a living shadow. It was bigger now, surer in its movements, no longer fragile, no longer unsure of where it belonged. It stopped near the fence and looked back at Cole. Just once, Cole felt the moment settle in his chest, warm and sharp at the same time. He didn't step forward, didn't raise a hand. He had learned that some moments asked only to be witnessed. "Go on," he said softly. The lioness paused, lifting her head to test the air. Somewhere far out across the land, the wind shifted, carrying with it the promise of open ground and quiet nights. She turned toward it without looking back. The cub hesitated for a heartbeat. For an instant, Cole wondered absurdly painfully if it might take a step toward him instead. He hadn't realized how deeply that thought had taken root. But it didn't. The cub stood still, tail flicking, once eyes steady on Cole's face. Not pleading, not uncertain, understanding. Then it turned and followed its mother. Cole let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. He watched until the two shapes softened with distance, blending into the land itself. No drama, no final sound, just motion. Purposeful, free. When they were gone, truly gone, Cole remained where he was. The silence felt different now, not empty. Complete. He sat on a low rock near the fence, elbows on his knees, letting the warmth of the sun soak into him. For a long time he thought about following them, about walking until the world narrowed to sky and ground and breath. The idea came easily, but he didn't stand. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. The edges were soft from years of handling. A boy squinting into the sunlight, smiling like the world had never taught him caution. Cole traced the outline with his thumb. "I listened this time," he said quietly. The wind brushed past him, carrying the words away without judgment. Behind him, the rehabilitation center hummed with quiet life voices, low doors opening and closing, ordinary moments continuing. Cole didn't rush back to it. He didn't feel pulled away either. For the first time in years, he felt exactly where he was supposed to be. He stayed until the sun climbed higher and the land shimmered with heat, until the tracks where the lioness and her cub had passed softened under the wind, smoothed back into the desert's endless pattern. When Cole finally stood, his movements were unhurried. Somewhere out there, a black cub no longer followed anyone through the dark. It walked beside its mother now, guided by something older and stronger than fear. Cole smiled small, real. "There are beings who enter your life not to stay," he thought, "but to lead you to the place where you stop running." He turned and walked back toward the path, boots steady on the sand, carrying with him the quiet certainty that some endings are not losses at all. They are releases. This story reminds us that responsibility doesn't always arrive by choice. It arrives by need. True courage is not found in strength or authority, but in presence, staying when it's easier to leave. The cub didn't seek rescue. It sought commitment. In life, the smallest voices often carry the most urgent truths, and listening, truly listening, can change the course of both our actions and our healing. Compassion, accountability, and patience are not weaknesses. They are the foundations of trust. And sometimes redemption begins the moment we decide not to walk away.